What's going on, fellow reformers? It's Keegan, and if I sound muffled or anything, I'm a little bit under the weather, but I really wanted to give a really good review on Superman for all seasons. And if I look down, it's because one, I am accompanied by the great Queen Gigi, and I also have a set of notes here because a lot of these books get very dense. It's a lot to memorize, even for an English major. And I wanted to bring up certain small constituents that make the narrative what it is. So, unlike a lot of other comic reviewers, they will just give you a plot summary. I'm not going to list, tit for tat what every event is in these four issues because you've probably already read it if you're listening to this or you are going to plan on reading it. Anyway, it's four issues. The books are rather longer than your average comic, but it's to the advantage of everyone that these are a bit longer because we are getting this from the point of view of other characters, not solely Clark's. So in the first issue, you have Jonathan Kent giving his point of view and his narration, and the narrations are very, very strong. They're a very strong proponent of this story, and it gives you a different outlook, almost like a panoramic point of view of all the events that are occurring in Metropolis and also throughout Clark's entire life. So, like I said, the first one is Jonathan Kent, and he basically discusses how Superman growing up is tumultuous, but also to a great benefit for everybody because Clark is aging, he's getting out of high school, and he eventually moves to Metropolis to go work at the Daily Planet. And the Kent family, for lack of a better term, kind of has a difficult time coming to terms with this, but they also are very, very happy at the fact that Clark is going to go and make something of himself and potentially, albeit discreetly, show the influence that he can have on the world, which leads to a theme of realistic morality that I think this book really, really exudes. And the issue that can happen in a lot of comics is comics can get too unrealistic for their own good. They have a lot of a science fiction element, which is great, but it's not good for a market audience to just market the science fiction aspect of the comic because you are going to turn a lot of readers off and make them feel stupid, and you never want to make your readers feel stupid. You want to make your readers relate to every narrative that you're telling. And I find that Jeff Loeb does this perfectly because Jeff Loeb can add anything, whether it's science fiction or any other theme that he wants to add, but make it in a way that everybody, no matter what their age is or where they come from, can fathom the narrative. And also, Darwyn Cooke does that exponentially well in Superman Confidential, which I am going to review soon as well. So you can have these science fiction elements, through superpowers and through kryptonite and through the backstory of Krypton, but you have to make it make sense to your reader. And I believe Darwyn Cooke and Jeff Loeb do this the absolute best out of anybody. And the narrations on top of that give you a really good indicator on not just who Clark is, but also what those other characters mean to Clark. So with Jonathan, there's more of a sentimental value in terms of upbringing and in terms of a parental guidance. Because John initially is not apprehensive per se, but he's more concerned about how to bring up Clark and what Clark's powers can do if they're revealed too much. Whereas Martha is more of the stereotypical motherhood figure, that a lot of men in society need. So that's another good proponent of realism within Superman that can make anybody relate to him. And then for the second narration, you have Lois Lane. And this is a really good one. This is for the second book. And I think that her narration was probably the strongest. I think because you get to learn more about who Lois is in general, and you get to learn a little bit more about Superman as he's getting older, or Clark, for lack of a better term, as he's getting older. And Lois brings up some really good points about the real world, about journalism, about journalistic integrity, and how a journalist has to believe in what they're writing in order for it to be fact, and you can't go by what you hear. So in a lot of other worlds, a lot in the sports world and even entertainment world, a lot of journalists will go by what they hear and then they immediately report it, but they don't necessarily believe it because they go for clickbait or they go for likes or engagement. But Lois is really giving the audience a theme of journalistic integrity here that I think really can really relate to anybody who is a writer, anybody who is in the real world right now as we speak, because with the advent of media, you get a lot of false information, and it's very difficult to navigate now what's true and what's not. And the other thing I wanted to add too, from a perspective of literature and in English, being a master's student right now, it's really good what Jeff Loeb does in terms of accentuating word choice and diction. And what I mean by that is he will underline certain things that he really wants you to remember. So when he's mentioning Collins from the Star, he will underline the star, and the underline gives a visual indicator that this is a little bit of an important piece that the audience probably should not forget and understand, because you already have the Daily Planet and then you have the Star, so you have to differentiate the two, right? So that's another little small constituent that Jeff Loeb does that will really help the reader. And this is also for rhetorical effect too, because then it has the audience questioning the differences between the Star and the Daily Planet. So for instance, Lois is defining Superman, right? She's trying to define who he is, what he does, and what his exact purpose is to Metropolis and to the grander world. And what happens is she says that Collins ends up calling Superman the Metropolis Marvel, but she says that sounds too much like a pro wrestler, which rhetorically got me because I'm a pro wrestler. So I thought that was a nice little comparison there. But it sounds too much like a pro wrestler, and what they're trying to say is it sounds too gimmicky. And because pro wrestlers are very gimmicky. So, again, the word choice there really represents a gimmicky nature to Superman as a character. And that's what we're trying to avoid, is making Superman just gimmicky. We want to make Superman a symbol like this, how this is the symbol for hope. We want to have a whole bunch of different rhetorical symbolisms for Superman for a reader to fathom, to understand, and to eventually relate with on a very, very sentimental level, aka using pathos to make the reader connect with the character. So Lois defines Superman as somebody that's too good to be true, and somebody that could do whatever they wanted, yet they choose to be a hero for positive reasons, but she's trying to find out more ulterior motives, and really, Clark doesn't have any ulterior motives other than to symbolize truth, justice, and what the American way is right now. So this is really, really, really interesting, because I think Superman is the perfect example of hope, especially in today's world and everything that goes on today. And somebody to be too good to be true, this word choice from Jeff Loeb really, again, gives you a recounting of exactly everything that's happened in the world and how much we can't trust things. We can't trust ourselves, we can't trust other people, we can't trust governmental institutions, and I think that this word choice really accentuates how most people, if not everybody, is feeling today. And it's not just a romantic love story of Lois being like, oh, it's so nice to see somebody, he's too good to be true, he's too good of a man for me. That's one part of it, but the other part is a more social justice component to the book. And eventually, speaking of social justice, we get to Lex Luthor. And Lex Luthor is necessarily the evil, but he's the vengeance of this book. He's the motif of vengeance and retribution. Because Lex Luthor does things for himself, he only cares about himself, and he cares about how he looks in the public eye. And Lex is a perfect example of a governmental institution hiding all of the negatives to try to accentuate the positives of their corporation, aka LexCorp. So Clark ends up coming back to Smallville, and he's looking around, and Smallville is like the symbol of hope for him to consistently regroup. And Lex says that he prays for lesser men, yet all he does is care about, Superman's emerging success, and is envious of Superman's heroic ventures because Lex wants to be the hero at the end of the story, and he always claims that he's the one that brought Metropolis to prominence, and he's the one that has made it what it is today, and also makes it the most technologically savvy city, arguably not just in America, but in the entire world. So that's another good envious dynamic for Lex Luthor, because it's not just some evil government corporation wanting to take somebody down. He's legitimately providing reasons that he is justified to himself that are for the greater good of everybody. So Lex thinks that Superman can, turn at any time and he's not going to be uncontrollable. But Lex is trying to come up with reasons, almost like how Batman did in the Tower of Babel, to figure out everybody's weaknesses. So if they ever do turn on you, you can take them down. So Lex's reasoning is not out of the ordinary. It's just the backstabbing methods that he has to get to those reasonings. And really, Superman represents all of Lex's insecurities because Lex wants the population to admire him and make him have this semblance of aura that nobody else has. And also, you can see that because he ends up setting things in correlation to make Superman lose confidence. And all Lex wants is for Superman to lose his own personal hope, because then that gives Lex all of the autonomy and all of the power going into the future. Which is why in number 4 of For All Seasons, you have Superman going back to Smallville to reinvigorate himself and find who he is, which is why it's told by Lana Lang, who is his teenage love interest. And she still has feelings for him, and they're more friends at this point. However, she's still that motivator because she was the first to find out that Clark had these powers. And she trusted him to not want to hurt her, but also he trusted her to not reveal it unless he said it was true. And you can see this when she says a quote in here, and then John and Martha look very flabbergasted, and Clark goes, yeah, she knows. So that symbol of trust is also something big within this story, and it's big within Superman's character. And Superman will always be Clark, not just to Lana, but to John and to Martha. And we can see this because when there's a flood that happens, he ends up reinvigorating his passion to be who he is, and he saves all of them. And this is where Superman eventually comes back and says, bring it on, Lex. What do you got for me? So all this autonomy and all of this hope is something that, again, not just readers can relate to, but the whole world can relate to if they took the time to even know what this story was. And like I said, the 4 narrations give you 4 different perspectives on how somebody can really not just change the world, but change the lives of small town individuals. And for Lex, to him, it's negative. For Lois, it's positive. For Lana, it's to move forward and move on with her own life in a positive manner. And for John, it's to also move on with his life, but also not forget the past and what shaped him and also what shaped Clark. So the element of time is something big too. But last but not least, I would love to discuss the art, because Jeff Loeb does something that a lot of other authors don't do, and that's let the artist speak. And I'm not talking about speaking in terms of linguistics, but speaking in their art, because art is a language. And I like that there's not an overabundance of speech bubbles that will overwhelm the reader or crowd the page. Instead, Jeff and Tim, they must have had some kind of agreement that Tim could also have a lot of speaking within this, and it's seen throughout his art. So, like, if you guys can see it, and it's not too lopsided, like, there's so many different ways that Tim does this, and he does it in a way where the art's relatable, and that's the one thing that Superman is very relatable. So I'm trying to find a good scene right now, but Superman's all about relatability and responsibility when you have the ability to change things. Like for example, here, if you see the landscape, it's in issue 1, I believe. This is absolutely beautiful. Like, if you look at the color scheme and you look at how both characters are placed looking at the sunset, it's almost like the end of an era. And this first issue really is an end of an era for John having to move on. So scenes like this, I think, are very telling. And you see how Jeff doesn't have as much dialogue or as much prose here, because the scene is telling you everything that you need to know. And that is something that Tim Sale is very, very good at. I remember not loving Tim Sale's art, a little bit ago, but I've grown to really appreciate it. And his landscape is very well done. So, like, yeah, and there's so many different other themes here. Like, he uses an ink wash style, so you can see right here, it's almost like pastel of Superman flying. And I think this is actually better than just seeing him fly, because it shows the abruptness of him having to take off and go do something. So that was my little review of Superman For All Seasons. Let me know what you guys think. Please like, share, comment, and subscribe. I would love to do more of these, because I just don't want to give you a review. I want to give you a little bit of a English literature analysis on comics and I want to do more of them. So again, hit that subscribe button. It means a lot. Comments mean a lot. All engagement means a lot. So thank you, and I'll see you relatively soon. And Queen Gigi also says,